Hello, NaNoWriMo. I am Grant Faulkner. I'm Executive Director of National Novel Writing Month. And here we are, tallying up the days. It's day 4. I'm particularly proud of myself because I have a 4-day streak. I've decided to focus on my streak more than my word count, but hopefully they will mesh together.
Hello, NaNoWriMo.
Oops.
I am Grant Faulkner. I'm Executive Director of
Sorry,
National
everybody.
Writing Month. And
I just am
here
getting
we
an
are,
echo based on
tallying up the
everything I
days.
just
It's
said.
day 4.
I don't think
I'm
I can
particularly
talk
proud
with
of myself.
two speakers going. Now it's fine. Sorry, everybody. I'll go back. But yeah, so just wanted to say that we're holding this it's not only donation weekend, it's a big writing marathon for the next 3 days. And we have this challenge of writing 130 million words as a community. And the great thing is that we've already written 30 million words as a community, and we're just kind of halfway into day 1. So congratulations on that. Keep writing. Let's hit 130 million. Let's go way beyond that, because I think 130 or 40 million is our record. So I'd love to hit 150 million or maybe 200. Shoot big. But it's a great time not only to catch up on your word count, but to build some cushion. This is the best thing I like to do, even though I haven't built up a cushion, is kind of get ahead in the first week or two. And I have to say, you know what? Believe it or not, a lot of people rush out of the gate, super enthusiastic about their novels. But this is the moment when a lot of people drop off. That's one reason for our timing. So please keep writing. And that's why we have Francesca here today to provide you some inspiration with your novels. And I'm going to talk with Francesca and introduce her soon. But I wanted to tell you about the donation part of this weekend. And the goal is to raise $175,000. And this is our biggest fundraising weekend of the year. And just to give you some context, our total budget is $1.4 million. Sounds like a lot of money, but we serve 500,000 writers with that budget. And a lot of people think we just kind of flip the switch on the website and everything turns on and it's NaNoWriMo and there's nothing else going on. But we actually we have 900 municipal liaisons, volunteers around the world that we support. We have a young writers program where 90,000 kids and teens write with us each year, and we help about 10,000 classrooms teach NaNoWriMo, provide them all sorts of free resources and workbooks. And we have, the website and a staff of 10. It takes a lot to do all this. So I'm actually pretty proud. That figure of about 500,000 writers supported by $1.4 million is like less than $3 per writer. So it's a very effective use of our money. So I just wanted to mention that. And just to define what this double up donation part of the weekend is, $25 donors get the $50 goodies. $50 donors get the $100 goodies. And then you also get the 2022 donor pin and bracelet, and the 2022 pin if you donate $50 or more. So think about that. Extra goodies, double the goodies for this weekend. But on that note, I just want to challenge people or to ask you while we're talking today, just to think about what NaNoWriMo means to you, think about what it gives you, and provide your own personal answer for why you might donate. And I just wanted to mention one thing, is that everything we do is free. And the reason this is because we want to provide everybody in the world access to their creativity. We want everyone in the world to be able to tell their story. And I can't tell you how many times when I've told people about how tough it is to put on a big event like this with our budget, they'll say, "Oh, just charge everybody $10." And if we did that, a lot of people couldn't sign up. They wouldn't have the $10. They might not have a credit card. And so we are dedicated to being providing access to creativity and being very, very inclusive as well. So this is our goal, and your donations will help us achieve that. So with that, before I introduce Francesca, I just want to, I don't know if Catherine's probably already done this, but if she could put the link to our double up donation hub in the chat, you can see all the stuff we have going on. Lots of activities throughout the weekend. We're giving hourly prizes. We have grand prizes every day. Today's grand prize is this elegant, stately writing box from Galen Leather Company. We have one big sweepstakes prize for the whole weekend. It's a 2023 Writers Digest Conference exclusive package. You get free admittance to the conference in New York City. You get free lodging, and we pay up to $500 for travel. So it's nearly a $2,000 value. So we'll be giving that away. So yeah, so it's going to be fun. And this is the part I really want to get into, is talking to Francesca Leah Block, because she's one of my favorite authors. And she inspires me because she's both prolific and provocative. And she's perhaps best known for her series, Wheatsy Bat, which is also known as Dangerous Angels. And it follows Wheatsy and her family of choice as they explore gender identifications, different kinds of sexually fluid intimacies, and the challenges of living in the working class of Los Angeles. And this basically describes my ideal novel. And it's now being set to be adapted for television. And I won't read through the list of awards she's received, but there are many, and she's written about 25 books of fiction. And she recently published, I think that's about 2 or 3 years ago, The Thorn Necklace, which I've read, and I actually wrote the foreword to. It's a beautiful book, and the reason I really like it is it's one part, writing advice and writing inspiration, but it's also a memoir, which makes it, like, I think, different and more interesting than a lot of writing books. And then she also just came out with this beautiful, beautiful book, House of Hearts. I think this came out last July. So it's a wonderful book as well, and I recommend it. So welcome, Francesca.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I wanted to start with The Thorn Necklace, just because, right now, I feel like a lot of writing is about developing your writer's mindset, your creative mindset. Mm-hmm. And I think The Thorn Necklace goes into that in such an interesting way. And I know that the title came from a Frida Kahlo painting. So I was wondering if you could kind of talk more about the genesis of the book and how it relates to the thorn necklace metaphor.
So that painting with her wearing the thorn necklace, I thought it was a perfect example of what she symbolizes for me, which is turning so much suffering into so much beauty. So I thought that would be the controlling metaphor, so to speak, of the whole book. In my own experience, art has been incredibly healing. Life's been difficult, but art has been easier for me, creativity. So I wanted to write a book that helped other people experience that same kind of healing through expression and using some of the craft elements that I developed over years of teaching and writing.
That's interesting. And I think sometimes NaNoWriMo is so much about like the goal, deadline, the creative midwife of that, the kind of pushing yourself further to go kind of beyond yourself and what you think you're capable of. But we hear often many stories about how the writing experience also boosts people's confidence, helps them be part of a community, and there are a lot of nourishing parts about it. And so I was wondering if you could talk about, like, why is writing healing, or how has it been healing for you?
So even as a little kid, I just was drawn to putting down my feelings, using imagery. It just felt good. It made me feel better. And my whole life that it was that way. At a certain point, I read a book called The Midnight Disease by A.W. Flaherty, which is a wonderful nonfiction book. It's about hypergraphia. The author suffered a tragedy and couldn't stop writing after it happened. She covered surfaces nonstop. And later she is a neurologist. She turned that into this book, and she studied this way that the brain actually responds to expression. In fact, Holocaust survivors reported healing just by telling the story, right? Which makes sense to any of us who write, I think. So I really realized there was a connection between that for me. And most of the books that I love are about a character going through some kind of trauma to some kind of healing. And the author is perhaps reflecting their own journey that way, or the journey of their ancestors. Books like Beloved by Toni Morrison, Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende, Love Medicine by Louise Erdrich. Some of my favorite books that really are about that, I think. So it all just kind of came together in The Thorn Necklace as part of that theme, but it's been that theme in my entire life, really.
That's interesting. While you were speaking, I kept thinking about the Maya Angelou quote, which I think goes, "There's no greater anguish than a story untold."
Oh, that's perfect. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, one of my favorite lines from your book is, when we write from our deepest longings, our stories have broader appeal. And I'm intrigued by that because I think, like, one thing that I think will help people keep writing throughout the month of NaNoWriMo is if they understand the purpose of their writing and the kind of why behind it,
Yeah.
what they're in conversation with. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that.
So I think that we carry around these beliefs, but we feel kind of shy to share them, maybe. And I think it should be scary to share. It should feel a little scary to share them. That means that shows how deep they are. But if you're brave and you write about them, it's going to touch your reader. The universal, the personal becomes universal. The more specific and personal that you are about your experience, the more it will touch others, I really believe. So I encourage people to find that meaning and share it. And I do have an exercise. I mean, we can either do it at the end, or I can just briefly mention it here, whatever you prefer.
How about we think about both?
Okay.
Briefly mention it, and we can see if we have time at the end. That'd be great.
Perfect. So I just did this with my novel 3 class at UCLA Extension the other night, and it was like everyone just lit up. It was 9:30 at night. Everyone was tired. I did this exercise, and everyone just lit up, like you could see it. And all it is, we write down the things that we believe in about life. If I were to die tomorrow, what do I want everyone to know that I stood for or believed in? And I say to them, you can write them as cliches. They might be cliches. It's okay. The way you write about them in the book will make them personal. And they wrote them down and they read them, and you all fall in love with each other, first of all, because the humanity just rises to the surface. And many weren't cliche, but what I said afterwards is, this is for you to now look at your book you're writing and see if these are in there. And if they are, great. And if they aren't, do you want to strengthen them? And maybe in your book is something else that you don't even realize you believe in. So it's about getting to that deep meaning behind the story.
I love that. I hope let's try to make time for that, because I really do believe that it's this interesting irony that the things sometimes that we fear to write about, that we fear to reveal, it's just like you said, those are the things that other people also feel and they're going to connect with, and we won't feel so alone with what we think of as our difference.
100%, yes.
Yeah. Well, cool. I look forward to that. And on that note, I know every writer, I think, takes detours or has to question with this, like, what am I going to write? What is meaningful to write? And like you're a professional writer. How do you write something and put it into the world to earn a living? And I just want to tell people about your NaNoWriMo pep talk, which is available on our website and everyone should read. But you tell this very interesting story about one of those detours that you took, and that your agent recommended that you write a romance trilogy, and a very commercial romance trilogy. And I'll just say that didn't seem to work out for you. So I'll let you tell the story.
So to note, it was my ex-agent, but God bless her. She was trying to help me, but I'm no longer working with her. But that, she was legitimately trying to help. And I think it's great to write anything you want to write, and as commercial or non-commercial as it could be. For me, that it didn't work, and I wasn't writing what I really wanted to write. I was struggling financially. I'm taking care of 2 kids. The housing crisis hit me really hard, et cetera, et cetera. So, and at that time I had been relying on my writing to support me before I was fully teaching the amount that I am now, which is every day, but which is great because it takes the pressure off of me for the books. But in any case, I tried this thing, and I learned stuff. You learn from every detour, right? You get lost, you learn more. I learned about self-publishing and promotion, and I learned what I did want to write and what I didn't want to write. And it actually made me go more towards what I did, even leaving behind some of the other work I had done previously that was perhaps less commercial than that, but wasn't what I really wanted to be doing, which is like House of Hearts, basically. So. Yeah,
it's an interesting fork in the road, I think, especially when you start publishing your work. Definitely. I feel it with every book. And my joke is, if given the choice between a commercially viable book and a non-commercially viable book, I always somehow choose the latter. It always just I have a greater degree of fascination for it for some reason.
Yes.
But I wanted to remind viewers, we've already got a question, but we will, I think the last half of this webcast is going to try to answer all of your questions. So please put them in chat, and Catherine will give them to me, and we'll try to answer them all. But it's interesting because Francesca, I think like one way, I don't know, there's so many different types of mentors, but I'm very curious because you wrote about your father as mentor in the Thorn Necklace, and I'm curious about the value of mentorship in general and your specific mentorship.
Well, yeah, my dad was, and my mom, they were my champions. My dad in particular, just from the beginning, I'm so lucky that I think that is why, as I said, though I struggle in life, it's easier for me and create the world of creativity, I think, because he instilled that. So I'm very lucky. I try very hard and very consciously to be that for my students because I learned it from him. I think I learned it well from him, and not everyone has that for many reasons. Parents worry, they want to make sure their kid can pay the bills, right? So they may not encourage. My dad was a very different generation, and I am too. And so we were able, I was able to do that early on, but not everyone can, and I couldn't today. So I think that parents are protective. It doesn't always happen, but you can find it as an adult. You can find it from your friends. You can find it from writing groups, and you can find it from NaNoWriMo, which is what I really love about this so much. I think that it is very hard to do this, but this is my motto about life. It is hard. No one told me it was hard. I had to discover it was hard, and they also never told me, though I guess my parents showed me to some extent, that you don't have to do it alone. And you need more than, you need a lot of people, you need a village, right? It's very hard to be a person. So I think, and it's hard to be a writer. And I think the more community and the more support you can have in whatever way, and it can be even a book. It can be so many people and different things. So I believe in that very strongly.
I like the way you define mentorship in those broad terms, because I think sometimes we think of mentor and we think of one particular person and kind of that person who's going to be older and wiser perhaps and teach us, but you've broadened it to be like books and your peers.
Yes.
And the community itself. I think it's also interesting because I was one of these writers actually before I came to NaNoWriMo, where I was a very solitary writer, and I thought I did it all myself. And I was not looking at all the people in my life who were actually supporting me and mentoring me in their various ways.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like what beyond your experience with your parents, it sounds like you have a lively community, both through your teaching and maybe other ways as well.
Well, I certainly get a lot of energy from my students and inspiration in that, we're looking at the books together, we're picking the books, we're talking with the books. I think that brings a lot, and just it's so good to, I'm so much in my head and alone at my desk as a writer, we all are. So just being able to engage with people about writing, which is really what I talk about at parties too. It's like all I talk about. So it's wonderful to have that community for sure. I feel very grateful.
Well, you're obviously a very prolific writer. And as I mentioned in the bio, I think you've written about 25 books or more, I bet. And NaNoWriMo has its own prolificness kind of embedded in the event. So I'm wondering about your creative process, how you're so prolific, and if there are any tips you can pass on to writers right now.
Another thing I love about NaNoWriMo is that you have to write freely and without thinking too much. And I think probably the biggest issue my students face is, how do I just keep writing? I get stuck. I start being critical of it. What do I do? So this gives you that impetus, which I think is so wonderful. I don't write on a schedule. I don't write a certain number of words or pages, etc. I tell my students to do it. Don't do as I do, do as I say. But for me, it goes in cycles. I'm always engaged with writing every single day, whether I'm talking about it with somebody, whether I'm teaching, whether I'm reading, whether I'm writing, but I'm not sitting there writing another book per se. I worked for a year and a half on a book that I just discarded, started something else. I didn't work every day on that. So it varies. I think what's most important is that you balance it. You get out and you move, you talk to people, you do healing things, you find inspiration to fill up again. And again, that can be just a walk or a talk or, looking at some art, reading. So I think it's different for everyone, but if you can have some kind of schedule, that's wonderful. It's just not always possible for everyone, and it's not essential for everyone, I believe.
That's interesting that you wrote or worked on a book for a year and a half that now you're not, or you might not in the future. I think it's always interesting for writers, like, we want to be, I would love that if every word I wrote ended up at the final draft or whatever mattered, all that time went someplace, but it does go someplace. And I guess this is Karen Russell, who is one of our pep talkers. She said only about 10% of her rough draft makes it into her final draft. And she said, once you kind of accept that, you can have fun writing badly. And so, and so I guess I wanted to say, how do you think about that? Doing a lot of writing and not really thinking of it as these have to be the words I use that make it into the final draft.
That makes sense with her writing, because every word is perfect. It's so beautiful. I think that the freedom, it just goes back to the freedom of expressing it, and not worrying about it at that stage, and knowing that there is a different hat that you will put on that is the editing critic's hat. You'll put that on later, but if you put it on too soon, it can mess you up. When I teach a craft lesson, at the end of the craft lesson, my favorite part is saying to them, you know what? I want you to forget every single thing I said that doesn't make you want to rush home and write. And they all laugh and they love it. I said, you can store that away, or you can look it up later, but just to have you hear it, fill yourself up with it, but know that it's the thing that makes you feel alive. Lean in towards that, whatever it is that makes you feel alive. And sometimes you're not tapped into, I don't know, we can be sad and not really even know what that is, but even a glimmer of that, leaning into that. And it doesn't have to be happy, it can be sadness, whatever. It's just life, and that's where the inspiration can come.
I love that as a writing tip, to lean in to what makes you feel alive. And it's because my next question was about the inner critic. And one of the things we do with our Young Writers program is that we'll have students draw their inner critic.
I love that.
And it's great. And one student sent in his drawing, and it was this crazy monster with multiple arms that was throwing things at him, and multiple legs, and very scary beast. And we have them then wad it up and throw the inner critic away, which is one way maybe to get rid of the inner critic, but you're leaning into what gives you life is another way to get rid of the inner critic. So can you speak more about how the inner critic and how that has, what your experience has been?
So there's that wonderful Anne Lamott image of the rat that she put in a jar and seals the jar. And I think that's a great image. For me, as I mentioned earlier, I have a beastly inner critic about everything in my life. It is quieter around writing for whatever reason, which is, again, my intention with the thorn necklace, to help other people kind of find that. But I know what it's like to have that. And I don't know. I mean, I wish I had a simple answer for it. I think that it goes back to, for me, it has gone back to community. It has gone back to support from other people. It has gone back to, kindness to the self, to others. I love the idea of imagining it as in an image form and crumpling it up. That's beautiful, but it's a tricky thing. I think I would just say a lot of self-care and support and self-awareness, kindness.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to try to make some time judgments here. I was wondering, how long do you think your exercise will last?
Really just 5 minutes. Well, it depends on how much you want to share. People want to share it. And so I can, any length. I mean, we can write for 3 minutes and you can get a list in that time.
Okay, let's give it 10 minutes and I'll try to hold time at the end for that. I think this kind of relates to the inner critic question, and I'll just ask this, and then we'll move on to some of the questions from our viewers. I think it's always interesting when a character seems to just resonate deeply with people, like Weetzie Bat. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts about what makes Weetzie Bat so resonant for people.
Can we talk about Izzy instead? No, I'm just kidding.
Sure. I mean, anybody. Oh, Izzy in your new novel. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Talk about both. Talk about both.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think Weetzie Bat, I wrote it when I was so young, and I think there's an innocence and a nostalgia for LA in the 80s at that time. And there's the things you said so kindly about creating your own family and gender identity and breaking these barriers down. And, I think I keep getting this tarot card for Weetzie of the Fool. I feel like Weetzie is just going out into the world, guileless and just wide open eyes and seeing the magic. So I think that appeals to people. My new Izzy is very different. She came to me in a vision. She came to avenge the death of a character from another book randomly. I saw her rise up out of the desert. She's very tough, she's smart, and she's been through hell, and she is on a quest to find what happened to her beloved boyfriend who has gone missing. And she gets involved with this cult, and she finds herself ultimately, and there's some Greek mythology, it's a mystery. But what I wanted to do with that character, who is not me at all, but I wanted to show a character who suffered a lot, but was very, very strong, and who also, I suppose she's not an artist, but there's a little of that Frida Kahlo energy in this character. So that I hope that people will respond to that. I feel like some of my characters have been more victimized, and as much as she suffers, she's not a victim, and she does transform by the end. And to me, that was really exciting to write. So
yeah, that's great. I just want to remind people, Izzy is the main character in this book, your newest book. And I was going to run a theory by you about Weetzie and maybe Izzy too, is that I think there's something about the characters that really resonate with people. They're the characters we put just somehow more love into them or more risk, and so I think for me it is like the characters who have less inner critic involved with them,
Yeah.
And I do think that those risks that we put into them, that vulnerability we put into them as authors, that's why they resonate. At least that's my theory.
That's beautiful. And it's like, I joke, but it's kind of true. The book broke me. I shattered my ankle. I financially, emotionally, a relationship ended. Like everything broke in my life, or my therapist died. It was like terrible time, but out of it came this book, and I healed pretty much from everything. And I have this book, and I don't recommend breaking yourself. Don't break. but if you do break a little, just you can turn it. It's the Frida Kahlo thing, full circle, right? It's like, how do you turn that into something beautiful and survive and also, break yourself open, let's say, metaphorically. That I think is required and is really important and feels good in the end, because you touch other people and make them feel better. And that's so much of what it's about.
Yeah, that's great. Break yourself open. Great way to think about it. I'm going to put on my glasses so I can read all this 8-point font that I'm getting the questions in. It might be 4-point font. First question. This is a good one for NaNoWriMo question. Is it enough to feel I have a book in me that I need to write? I haven't done any formal course in writing. Do you need a formal course in writing?
No way. I love this question. No, all you have to have is the desire to do it. And people come up to me and they have a look in their eye, and it's like, I say, I recognize the look. It just means I have a story. I need to tell it. You don't have to know any formal writing. You can read. It's great to read, but yeah, just write the story you want to write.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. And I actually have a theory that the best way to learn to write a novel is to write a novel.
Yes.
I think if you take a lot of courses about how to write a novel or read a lot of books about how to write a novel, they'll be helpful, but writing a novel is its own intense experience, and you've got to go all the way from the beginning to the end to kind of get what's involved.
And I wrote many without any, many stories without any education, and then many novels with a very minor education. And just reading is huge. So
Yeah. And I was going to say, since we both have our MFAs and talked a little bit about it beforehand, I mean, I only got my MFA because I was reading and writing all the time anyway. So I was like, I might as well get a degree in this. And like I said, it was cheap enough back then that I could, but I didn't need those classes to write,
yeah, and I just finished mine in 2019 after publishing many books, and I did it for mostly teaching purposes. I got a lot out of it in many ways, but it takes a lot out of you too, financially, etc. So I think you can definitely write without that. And there are resources like this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like your NaNoWriMo community.
NaNoWriMo, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Witchy Richie asks, what does your writing routine look like on average?
It looks crazy. It doesn't. It looks like whenever I can just sit down in the middle of my house with dogs and children running around, and older children now, and I can just find some time. It's just when I can find time. I wish it wasn't that way, but yeah. I think, but I said it's about thinking. It's staying engaged with it, thinking about it all the time. So even if you're not sitting down with a perfect, pristine environment at a perfect time, if you can be engaged in some way with the process, reading, writing, talking to people about it, I think it can happen. And if you can have a schedule, great.
I was going to ask, you said, I wish it wasn't like this. Do you wish you had a schedule?
I maybe not, part of me likes the freedom of it, but I think it would be nice to have more time to do it for sure. It doesn't feel that way, right? In this world. Yeah, but no, it's worked for me okay to have the other. And when I'm inspired, which is not all the time, certainly, but then I don't even remember, the time passes and I don't even remember when I sat down, and it can be at any time of day or night, and it just will happen. But you have to show up by being engaged with it all the time on some level so that it can happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the one great commonality that goes across every writer I know is the need for more time.
Yeah,
right. Never have enough time.
Right.
So this question, we don't usually talk about publications so much, but social media is a big part of all of our lives in some way. So the question is, what's your experience of the importance of building up a social media presence for publication? But maybe also as a writer, how does social media affect you as a writer?
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, it is important to have at least one account, just that, find one that feels okay to you. But what I've taught my students is, if you can make it about something that means something to you personally, rather than just selfies, blah, blah, it's like, really, you can build an audience who cares about the same things that you care about, even if it's a small audience. And my audience has been incredibly wonderful and loyal, and they're really how I support myself. Most of my income comes from my students through my social media, so it's essential. I think if you can do it in some way that feels organic to you. One of my students started an account where he posts quotes and pictures of authors. He's done it for years after this talk I did on this subject, and they're beautiful. He's not doing some forced thing. It's what he really wants to share. So I think if you can find a platform that you're okay with, and you can approach it in a way that feels authentic and organic, people will respond. And you don't have to have huge numbers, but just building community again.
Yeah, community. Do you find that social media is, I mean, a lot of writers feel like it's actually taking their writing and their creativity away from them as a distraction?
Yeah, it's so complicated in so many ways. I love that I can stay connected to, I know my students so well through that. I know my readers so well through that. There are great things, but yeah, sure, it's imperfect in a lot of ways. I use Instagram almost exclusively. I feel like it's less time consuming and just less whatever.
Yeah, the answer to that question is follow Francesca on Instagram and you'll see it in motion. Well, this is a good question from Francesca Gomez Ortega. Can you tell us about the books you've given up on reading and writing? Why did you stop?
I have not given up on too many writing that I've written. The recent one, when I gave up on it and put it aside and started something else, which is actually a screenplay, which I just was very freeing because I didn't feel like anyone will ever see it. So I had a lot of fun. And it just was alive and sparkling, just sparking. And I looked back at my book, and my book just looked like a dead fish to me. It just was like I couldn't feel it. But but I took what was happening in my life at the time and I put it into a story. The story itself is okay. It's just the way it was being told wasn't right. And I will use elements in the future. But it's often voice more than anything, voice or tone that doesn't quite work, but that doesn't mean it can't work later. And there are elements that you can use later. And books that I read, I used to I try to push myself through a book, no matter what, if I start it, especially if I bought it. But, certainly there are many I will read more quickly. And then the ones, there's never enough time for reading either. So
Right.
to read the ones that you really love. And I highly recommend those great books. They're classic books. And sometimes we think, oh, it's going to be boring. It's not going to be that great. I mean, I had never read Invisible Man. Somehow, how did I not read Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man until recently? I read it. It was like the best book I've ever read and the most shocking and engaging and beautiful. And so going back to a lot of those classic books can be so wonderful. And they are easier to read than you would expect because they're classic for a reason. They're just so good.
That's what we forget sometimes. They're classic for a reason. I
Yeah.
was going to say The Invisible Man is like one of those books that sometimes I think it gets assigned a lot in like high school and college. And some people think once they're out of high school and college, if they didn't read it, somehow they can't go back to it.
Yeah, exactly. But oh my God, go back to it when you're old. It's just the best. Or when you're young, even better.
Yeah, exactly. Or both.
Or both.
Well, Edwin Waters asked, would you advise us during NaNoWriMo to reread what we've been writing if that doesn't trigger our inner criticism too much?
Oh, that's a great question. I tend to reread a bit before I jump in, which means, of course, the beginning of the story is usually a lot stronger. But I think if it gets you in there, whatever gets you into it, yes, go back. If you have limited time, don't, or it does, great question, the way you phrased it. If it does trigger your inner critic, forget it. If it helps you engage, yeah, do it for sure.
I totally agree. I think it can put people in editing mode where they kind of want to perfect all that. But even in the context of NaNoWriMo, I like doing it just as a warm up, as a way to get my momentum,
Yes.
a way to enter the story.
Yes.
So yeah, that's at least my approach.
It works well too when you're if you are stuck going forward and you want to spend a day doing I mean, I know it's different with the word count stuff, but if you have a little more time to go back and strengthen something, sometimes you hit a roadblock and you have to go back to make it work. But what I love about this exercise of NaNoWriMo is that you are pushing forward and can do that later.
Right, exactly. Another question from Witchy Richie. Can you talk more about your use of tarot with regards to writing? I read tarot, but have only sparingly used it for writing. I really want to hear about this.
I'll tell you quickly. I have an exercise. When I went back to school, I studied screenwriting and as a minor kind of, and I learned the screenwriting beats, which helped me profoundly rewriting House of Cards, and also now teaching. I use them a lot. But what I do to they're very left brain, right? They can feel formulaic. So to keep it more right brain and more intuitive, I combine those with the tarot cards. So I'll do a reading where I match tarot cards with the screenwriting beats, and you come up with a whole structure of your story that way. And and you don't have to interpret tarot as it is supposed to be read. It can mean anything to you. And I do it as a group exercise, and it's really, really fun. So or just even one or a few cards that inspire you that day. You can just pick one for the day and then see if it gives you some imagery.
Yeah, that's so cool. We're big believers in prompts and writing prompts at NaNoWriMo. So
Yeah.
Jessica Hoffman has a question about Weetzie Bat. Weetzie Bat changed my life as a teenager. Is there something particular that inspired this story?
It was my life pretty much. A lot of that stuff is real, really things that happened to me. Even the witch, the cult, the Jane Mansfield fan club witch cult was real. It was just really writing my story, and of course there's some magical realism thrown in, but it was my life in the 80s LA, running around Sunset Strip, and my dad's being sick and dying, I think, was like the catalyst for the story too.
I think that's interesting though, because a lot of fiction writers struggle with that, about using their real life in their work and how to do that. Did you have any struggles with that?
I mean, I've exaggerated, obviously, because there's a genie, but I exaggerate a lot. But no, for me, my writing always starts there. I change it through various things, but for me personally, it's hard to not start there. Some people find it challenging to start there, and if they're writing fantasy or speculative sci-fi, I encourage you even more than if you're writing realistic fiction to look at the personal that's underlying it and infuse it with that, because I think you can still write wild fantasy that's nothing like your life, of course, but if you can think about how it connects to your life, it will give it a lot of meaning, I think, for the reader.
That's really interesting advice, because we do have a lot of fantasy writers in NaNoWriMo, and I always think the same thing. Yeah. Since we were talking about the tarot cards and prompts, Thomas Van Hare asks, how do you face down writer's block? Is writer's block even real? Very curious about your answer to that last one.
Well, with my last name, we don't talk about that. I mean, writer's block, is it real? I used to say, no, it's not real. You just can write anyway. But, there are times where it's not flowing. I think it's, again, I sound like a broken record, but I think it is about, staying engaged in whatever way you can. It doesn't mean you have to force out another book and another book. I was in a position where I had to do that financially early on in my career. I was lucky to be in that position, frankly, but it isn't always the best product. So I think what you want to do is try to stay engaged, show up when you can, and know that it will end. It will be over. Like the last year and a half, I was forcing out that book. I still wrote some, but it didn't feel great. But now other stuff is sparking and alive. So I think just stick with it, and it'll change.
Mm-hmm. I think that not flowing is a good definition of writer's block. It's not that it's totally blocked. I would say all you have to do is create an invitation to write, and words will come. They might not be your best words, but you can write. They just might not flow like on a day of high inspiration.
And you can always just go back to the most recent stressful thing that you went through, and even if it's a very minor thing, and just write a scene that they fictionalize it, and that can just get you connected to the emotion and to the process.
Yeah. Let's see, I skipped a question here. Karina Gasper asked, have you ever had to do a lot of research for a book, and how did you write the book while making time for the fact learning process? I have a hunch that Karina might be thinking about doing research on her NaNoWriMo novel now. So.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not a great researcher. I have students who write, tomes of research first and then write the book. And if you can then translate into the book, great. You will see the richness in the book, but you don't want it to interfere with the process. So you can always research later. House of Hearts, I did a lot of research, but it didn't feel like hard work because I was doing it as the story told me what I needed to learn about. I did have a, period of time where I was looking up some really dark stuff, and it was very hard. But I think you can do them simultaneously. You just don't want to fall down into the sort of the vortex of the research to the point where you're not writing the book. And especially during the month of November, when you can just be writing, and then you can mark all those areas and add them in.
Yeah, I would say, research is great. I love doing novel writing research. I think it can be a mode of procrastination. There are professional novel researchers out there who haven't written their novel, but they've done a lot of research. So so you got to find that balance of what inspires you or infuses you with energy versus, what could block you, essentially. The thing about research too is sometimes you can do too much research and you want to get it all in there, and you need to remember the fiction part.
Yes, my actually one of my mentors was like, you're so infatuated with this backstory stuff that it's taking over the story. Like, let's get to the, so I had to pull back on some of it, but I kept a lot of it. I won't give away what it is, but yeah, it is a balancing act for sure. And will enrich your story. Ultimately.
I just began reading this last night, and I think this next question from Elizabeth Weiss really captures my experience as well. She said, "What helps you write such wonderful prose? Your writing is so unique. I read Echo in 2004 at a tough time in my life, and your writing was such a life changer." Possible writing book recommendation, other than your own, maybe, I guess.
I like Wired for Story and Story Genius by Lisa Cron. I think those are both really good. But I think the best way, I have my students do an exercise where we read a novel, then they write a 3-paragraph annotation. The first one analyzes the plot. Thank you also for saying that about my work, by the way. So the first paragraph emphasizes or summarizes the plot, just so you can get adept at writing that briefly and understanding the elements of it. Sometimes 3-act structure. Second paragraph is one craft element that speaks to you, that you love. Like if it's the imagery, the sensory detail, you'll maybe quote a few things. And the third paragraph is how you will apply it to your own work, and very specifically. And I see their writing change so fast from that. So I highly recommend that, in addition to any craft books that appeal to you, you use the novels you're reading to teach you, to demystify, how is this done, right? And the best way to do it is if you start to cry or you start to laugh or your heart just pounds, look at what is it on the page? Is it the rhythm of the sentences, the diction, the imagery that is making you respond emotionally to something like that? And then that's how we learn how to do it ourselves.
Let's do one more question and then go to your exercise, and hope we might have time for other questions, but we'll see. And sorry, I couldn't get them all in, but since we kind of started with a variation of this question, the question is, why did you start to write?
Yeah, I think I had this drive to express myself in whatever way, whether it was drawing or dancing or writing. Writing was just the thing I was, more, I guess, a little better at, or just felt more natural to me than the others. But I just couldn't handle life without somehow expressing those feelings. So it really started like that. And as I said, I was lucky to have people around me who encouraged me in that way. Not everyone has that. But I don't know. And I remember, this is sort of a later phase of that. I remember going to hear the band X when I was about 17 years old, and I was in the whiskey, and it was dark and the music was pounding, and I was feeling it in my body viscerally. And I was like, I want my prose to do what music does, right? Which it can never do that, but it does something else wonderful. But I have that goal, have always had that goal to write something that shakes you in a visceral way. And I think that was from, I didn't know exactly that I felt that way until that moment, but I hope
that's so fascinating. My first novel, I remember having those same feelings. It was about, rock musicians and stuff. And I was so frustrated that the prose couldn't quite capture the sound. But anyway, it was nice to attempt it, I guess.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, great books that do that. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's try your writing exercise. So I'll let you take it from there. I'm going to get pad and paper. So I'm going to do it too.
Great. So we'll do 2 to 3 minutes. I just want, without thinking, I want you to write down, and tomorrow, what do I want people to know that I believed in? And you can say even something like love conquers all, or some people write very nuanced things, but without thinking, just a list.
Okay.
Are there any questions about that?
Yeah, if you have any questions, put them in chat.
Yeah, actually, if I'll look at the chat too, so I can answer those while you guys do that.
Okay. So you froze on my screen just a little bit, but it's like, when you die, what you want people to know mattered to you.
Yes, what you believe in about life. And I don't know if I can see the questions, but if I can, that would be great.
Yeah, I think if you open chat, you can. Francesca? I think we've been going for about 5 minutes.
Sorry, I thought you were, I'm so sorry.
Oh, was I the timekeeper?
Sorry.
No.
So I don't know, we don't have much time. So how do you want to, what would be the best way?
Do people usually share some of theirs?
Yeah. Can we do that? Should we put them in the chat?
Yeah, I
Some
think
are in there.
if people are comfortable, and if Catherine can put a few in, it'd be great to see them.
I was looking at some. I got caught up in the wonderful chat, actually. Sorry.
Okay, well, you could read them if they put them in
Yeah.
chat. That means people are comfortable with that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, great. So where is the most recent? Okay, be true to yourself, even if other people judge you for it. Pretending to be something you're not is miserable and no way to live. People are just walking each other home. I just heard that. Diagnosed with multiple sclerosis 6 months after giving birth to my only child has taught me to appreciate even the worst of times. It's powerful. People are more important than any ideal. My connections with others and myself gives my life meaning. We are all just walking each other home. Yes. Sorry, it's getting stuck, so I'm missing some. I would want people to know that I loved unconditionally, no matter how many times it hurt, and it was worth every time it didn't. Beautiful. Family, friends, lovers, dogs. Dogs I saw 2 blocks down, all of it. That's beautiful. So wonderful. I mean, it's hard because it's sort of anonymous doing it in this format. You must save yourself, but you need friends and helpers too. Taking care of the planet is our first responsibility. Without that, nothing else will matter. No one can make you happy unless you're happy on your own. Intelligence and humility must be, I'm gonna start crying. Must be used carefully and together. Sometimes meaningful things great and contradict each other, but you can still hold space for them and find yourself in that necessary discord. Love is magic, which is innate to us all. Art will always be important. Community is power. Isolation is disempowerment. It doesn't matter what anyone but yourself thinks of you. As I read these, it makes me want to cry. Standing for justice in all things.
I feel like if I could summarize the intent and the content of this webcast, that might have summed it up, all of the things that you read. I'm curious, so I've forgotten the next stage of this exercise. Thank you for reading all those. That was a really wonderful reading, I thought. So what do people do next with this? So
you look at what you've already written or what you plan to write, and you see if these elements are in there. And if not, is there a way to put them in there? And if it's stopping your flow, forget it. Like I said earlier, don't look at this list yet, but maybe at the end of the month, you go back and you say, wow, does this match up with some of the things I wrote in the list? Can I infuse more of them into the story? Or is there something else the story is teaching me? I've learned things that I believe about life by writing the story. So it's a way to bring meaning into it, or to discover meaning out from it.
It's a really wonderful exercise. And I love how, you can apply it now, but I think, like, for me, like, how it would be very meaningful for that second draft of the novel, actually.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
it could really center you. It's a really interesting way to focus on what you've written. And I loved how you said that your writing itself can teach you something,
Yeah, no, I think, and if you impose a theme too early, I teach theme at the end of my courses. So if you impose a theme too early, sometimes you miss out on the discovery of the theme. So this is the time to discover all of this, but now you have a little head start, hopefully. And you're all in touch with it. I mean, you see how quickly people were able to produce these. So it's great that you're coming to this month with all this feeling in your heart that you want to express in a story. That will give it life right there.
Well, Francesca, we're at day 4. We're hoping that everybody on the webcast goes to day 5, day 6, day 7, keeps that streak, or at least keeps writing until the end. What's your number 1 NaNoWriMo advice at this moment?
Oh my goodness, I just told you everything I got.
I know, you told us everything. Is there anything else?
Just be really super kind to yourself and everybody else.
Yeah.
It'll help the writing.
Kindness can fuel writing, Yeah, kindness can help you sit in the chair every day. Be kind to yourself and other people. It can be like inspiring. Well, I know authors sometimes, I just want to like plug Francesca's book here. It's such a beautiful cover, and the pages I read were so beautiful. And you obviously have deep affection for Izzy. So I think everybody liked Weetsy Bat. Like, let's see what Izzy's up to.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to close by saying thank you for attending this webcast, and thank you for writing during NaNoWriMo, and help us get to that 130 million word count goal and beyond. So keep writing and record your word count on the NaNoWriMo site. And if you can contribute to our Double Up Donation Day, we would appreciate it very much. Even that $10 I mentioned that we will never charge people. If you can donate $5 or $10, you can't believe how much it helps. We're actually a community of writers, and that's the way we fund our programs. It's not through big donations or grants. It's largely through those small dollar donations from a lot of people who enjoy writing with us. So yeah, so thanks for attending, and keep writing. And we have a bunch of stuff for the rest of the weekend, so keep tuning in. Thank you, Francesca.
So much. Take
Yeah.
care.
Bye.